In Egypt, yes, Nagla.
For organizing this amazing exhibition. I would also like to thank Hilmi Al-Tuni for telling me stories through his books as a child, and more serious stories about his career today. And of course, my publisher who made this book possible. Where is she? Okay. So I started teaching graphic design at the Lebanese American University in Beirut in the mid-1990s. After a while, I had noticed that there is a predominant European influence in the students' work. Well, European and American. The students, in general, were taught in either French or English institutions prior to joining the university. They were not only taught foreign languages before their mother language at school, but they were taught about autumn leaves in a country where autumn barely exists, and other aspects of European culture, and not much about their own culture. In the graphic design history classes, in general, it is the classic Philip Meg's book that is used. I don't know if you use it here. The book covers graphic design in the US and Europe. A section was added in the 5th edition on design in the Middle East, and a little paragraph on design in Africa, a little as in little. Of course, this is not enough considering the amount of work that has been done so far in Cairo, for example. And this is where books such as the ones published by Khat are needed. Hilmi Al-Tuni and many other fellow designers have been busy in the field since the 1950s. However, information about their inspiring career is not yet available, neither online nor in the library. The history of graphic design in the Arab world is awaiting researchers to dig into early graphic designers' personal archives to compile their oral history and memory. It will be made accessible through many interviews and insightful discussions and digging in the archive of old magazines, books, posters, and other printing material. Hilmi Al-Tuni's book is a result of those long discussions and intriguing stories that Al-Tuni would tell about his more than 50 years career in the field of design, illustration, and other means of visual communication. There is a large number of books and articles that already document Hilmi Al-Tuni's work, but none focuses on his career as a designer. Yet, in his books, we, and I say we because the book is a product of collaborative effort between Al-Tuni, the publisher, and myself, a product of many Skype meetings, and I should also mention here Al-Tuni's recurring trips to Beirut, which made my task in gathering information for the book a lot easier. I also used the archive in Beirut and Cairo through Kinga. I don't know if Kinga's here, no, and Lena, who traveled to Cairo and visited Mr. Al-Tuni's studio and brought back photographs, and the Leiden University, of course, through Huda, who is based in Amsterdam. Hours of interviews compiled on my voice recorder, including jokes, sometimes serious jokes, anecdotes, and laughter. For those of you who do not know Al-Tuni, he has a great sense of humor that is revealed in his work, as you may have already noticed from the illustrations around this exhibition. Interviews for this book were not limited to Al-Tuni, but included friends and acquaintances of the artist, mostly in Beirut. Part of them are the designer and artist Kamil Hawa, and my mother, who worked with Al-Tuni on an interesting project in the 1970s. You can read more about this in the book. I'm not going to say everything. Yes, okay, so... So I am old? Is this what you're saying? In one of the interviews, Al-Tuni says, I am not only a painter, I am not only a book designer, I am not only a puppet artist, I am not only an illustrator. Isn't this what you said? I am not only a poster designer, I am all of these together. Before anything else, Al-Tuni is a storyteller, and what makes his stories appealing is that they are told with style that is good design and humor. He says, illustration entails a different set of requirements than painting. In most of his work, he adapted his artistic skills to editorial design. I asked Al-Tuni if he had a picture of himself as a little boy. He responded, yes, it is in my mind. I was dressed up in a talbouche and a suit. I sat next to my sister on a bench. I see images in my mind before I draw them. In Rihla fi Sura, Al-Tuni shows us what's in his mind with a story. For him, drawing is an act that involves thinking, as well as technical skills. Copying or reproducing a sight or an image can be achieved through the lens of a camera. The art of drawing or illustration goes beyond the convention of reproduction. Illustration requires a combination of intellect and creative skills. Using a large repertoire of imagery related to his past experience and upbringing, Al-Tuni constructed a unique visual vocabulary pertaining to his cultural heritage. Humor, wit, and tenderness are manifest in his fictional world, represented here on the page of this sketchbook. His characters often interact with his reader, speak to them in their own visual language, distorted, flat, and simple. Picture books offer a different kind of reading, one that requires the child to look at each picture carefully to decode the story. Most of Al-Tuni's books have a simple narrative with a single, clear image on each page. Relatively few characters and a straightforward plot. The viewer, while reading Al-Tuni's books, is put in the position of a commentator. It is partly this experience of being an active participant in the process of reading that makes reading Al-Tuni's book challenging for children as well as grown-ups. In his latest sketchbook that he kindly shared with me, and of course some of the pages are in the book, he creates a metaphysical space that contains a fish, a watermelon, a bird playing, a hudhud, a wooden horse, and a black cloud. These symbols share the same space without being logically connected. The exercise of putting the symbols in a logical sequence in order to make sense of a logical narrative is left to the viewer. As for the theme, this recurring little girl playing hide and seek who appears in Al-Tuni's paintings raised many questions and was interpreted as a social provocation, a rebellion against social constraints imposed on women who are supposed to remain hidden in order to abide by the dominant social understanding of the growing community in Egypt. This is one of the paintings that was hanging on the walls of a kindergarten in Beirut in the mid-70s in order to create an environment that was inspired by Arab artists and exposed children at an early age to local trends in artistic production. Al-Tuni contested the moralizing tone often used in the books published by government institutions to discipline the young generation. He was against the patronizing and boring children's stories that focus on teaching the young readers how to behave in a socially accepted way. He also challenged visual conventions in the presentation as well as traditional approaches in the production of storytelling for children. For example, in Khubz al-Sirar, Al-Tuni used his black, thick outline to introduce a contemporary way of framing his illustrations. To enhance the playfulness of his layout, he creates a space within a blob that travels around the pages of his book in different shapes. By doing so, he avoids the static and boring rectangular borders commonly used to frame illustrations in classical books. He also rejects the notion of the image that completes the meaning of the text. In most of his work, it is the image that adds meaning to the text. My illustrations, and I'm quoting Al-Tuni here, my illustrations were never literal translations of text, because in my illustrations, I always insert my own wajhat nazar, point of view, or point of view in English. For a series of folk tales, these are Huda's favorite. For a series of folk tales published by المؤسسة العربية للدراسات والنشر, He contextualized the stories and reproduced the traditional characters of the stories in a modern style, such as seen here. Illustration in each book had a different style depending on the story's historical context and themes such as Khalid bin al-Walid, Al-Hussein bin Ali, Fatat al-Qayrawan. He integrated Arabic letter or calligraphy as a visual element in his illustration, and he used arabesque and other repeated patterns to fill the spaces and create interesting compositions. He also used flat and abstract geometrical shapes, or etching and cross-hatching technique printed on colored background. At Dar al-Hilal, these are my favorite. So at Dar al-Hilal in mid-60s, Al-Tuni adapted his artistic skills to the editorial design's functional requirements. He simplified his illustrations and planned, which we will see later, and planned graphic compositions taking into account space for sidelines and copy text. His subjective and expressive painting skills as an artist were switched off and replaced by a rational approach in the production of editorial layout. A particular contemporary formal vocabulary was evident in the layout as well as the covers designed in the spirit of the Bauhaus style. He refined photomontage and customized solutions that forced alternative perceptions of editorial design. White spaces, for example, were given importance as much as text. White spaces allow pages to breathe, according to Tuni. The use of primary colors is reminiscent of the distill or distill, a combination of vertical and horizontal rectangular shapes in red, blue, and yellow. Designing layout and creating interesting effects as a challenge at that time, was a challenge at that time when the printing press had technical limitations. Al-Tuni's illustrations often conveyed witty messages to reflect the content of the articles, such as Khamis Fijr, Thursday Radish, a made-up name by the author in his article that the illustrator had literally represented standing in the middle of the page, a funny man sporting a Western suit with the local traditional clogs, smoking a pipe with a radish on his head. How better to convey the message of Abdul Wahab being miserable without his music? In his spread of Al-Kawakib, Al-Tuni combined photography with his illustration, music instrument, the oud, and the record player filled the space inside the trumpet. Another example of Al-Tuni's witty illustrations is this representation of censorship in an illustration of the scissors cutting across erotic scenes in a film strip. And Fairuz's portrait drawn in a flower. He often designed double-page spreads as if they were a painting. Here he extends his illustrations to occupy the full page, with text in the background, breaking the conventions in the previous layout. In order to link the pages of the magazine, he often used his own handwriting for the title of the article to better match his illustration style. As for Nawal Saadaw's clinic promotion ad in the magazine in Al-Kawakib in the 50s, Al-Tuni overlapped transparent faces. By overlapping transparent faces, we can see their inner selves, as in a psychotherapy session. Al-Kawakib, so this is a series of Al-Kawakib. Tuni's career as a layout designer started at Dar al-Hilal when Mustafa Al-Amin, the founder of the publishing house, launched a competition for the best layout design for Al-Kawakib, a periodical that came out in the early 1950s. Al-Tuni won the competition and consequently was hired as the art director of Dar al-Hilal. On the covers of the books published by Dar al-Hilal, Al-Tuni often preferred to use his own writing by hand lettering most of the titles and subtitles on the book covers. Again, the hand lettering style matched the illustration style. In some cases, the writing was used for decorative purposes. These are few more examples in which Al-Tuni has used his hand lettering skills in conveying the meaning of the text through the creative designs of headings and subheadings. In most cases, the book covers were first conceived as paintings. Tuni adapted his artistic skills to the book covers' functional requirements by creating simplified illustrations and planning graphic compositions, while leaving space or taking into account space for the title, the subtitle, the author of the book. A more rational approach was required in the production of book covers that replaced the subjective expression of the artist. Budget restrictions and print limitations did not prevent Al-Tuni from producing interesting book covers. On the contrary, for him it was a challenge to play around it in order to explore new visual effects. A common practice at the time was the use of halftones in order to create different tones of the same color. Manipulating print effects involved not only creative skills and aesthetic sensibility, but also a scientific approach or knowledge and technical skills that can be acquired through the countless experiments with the printing machine. The effects were often unpredictable, which opened more space for improvising and experimenting in print effects and consequently producing new aesthetics. Print accidents were often exaggerated. For example, when inaccurate registration marks produced an effect of the movement and vibration on the page, they were appreciated by Al-Tuni, who later used this print inaccuracy as a new print effect. These experiments led to the discovery of not only new techniques, but also new visual effects. Al-Mu'assasa gave him the freedom to push the boundaries of their book jackets. He used all the methods in his growing repertoire to give each book an individual account, as well as an overall book of the publishing house's visual identity. In the case of Al-Mu'assasa books, consistency was achieved through the use of bold titles to underscore the contemporary spirit of the books that he designed. His book covers at Al-Mu'assasa broke the traditional layout standard of magazine layout and publishing house. By doing so, he contributed in raising new aesthetic standards of the publishing industry in the region. Wajhat Mazar is a periodical founded by Ibrahim Al-Muallim, published by Dar al-Shuruk and art directed by Al-Tuni. Whether it is a contemporary topic or an illustration that goes back to